The central nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cord. So we're going to talk about the spinal cord here. So the spinal cord is interesting because it contains two different types of matter, they call it. So when we talk about the spinal cord, we have what is called the white matter, or the brain for that particular matter. So the brain can also have white matter in it. And we have what is called gray matter. So the white matter is the myelinated axons. And the gray matter is actually the nerve cell bodies. So it's kind of interesting when we look at our brain and our spinal cord, they have quite a bit of gray matter. So there's actually the cell bodies that are residing there. And then in the terms of the spinal cord, we have spinal nerves that exit the spinal cord. The cell bodies are in the spinal cord for the most part, but then the nerves that exit are actually just bundles of myelinated axons. So let's look at the spinal nerves. These are actually part of the peripheral nervous system, which is abbreviated as the PNS. That's peripheral nervous system. So the spinal nerves are bundles of myelinated axons. So let's look at a diagram that shows the spinal cord and the spinal nerves. So in this diagram, we can see the spinal cord, and it is extending down from the brain. So right here, this extension of the spinal cord, and we'll notice that there's actually some enlargements. So there's a cervical enlargement, and that's because there are more neurons that are coming out and serving the upper arm. And then we have the lumbar arrangement, which are where the cell bodies reside that are serving the lower limbs. So this is all protected because it is running through your vertebral column. So the vertebrae protect the spinal cord. And we can see here that these spinal nerves are coming off, and they are actually labeled as to what vertebrae they are coming out of next to. So for example, we could have C1 and C2, C3, C4, all the way to C8, which is under your 7th cervical vertebrae. Those would be the cervical nerves. So we have, just like we have the cervical vertebrae, we have the cervical nerves. Now, something is very interesting about our spinal cord, I think, and that is that it doesn't come down as far as you would think it does. So notice that where my ribs are right here, so you can feel where the bottom of your rib cage is, and then follow it back, and that is about where the end of your spinal cord is. The end of the spinal cord is called the conus medullaris. So we're gonna write that down. So the end of the spinal cord, is at about L1 to L2. That's the lumbar region of your back, but it's the upper region. And it is called the conus medullaris because it's like a cone shaped. So let me spell that right. Now, coming off of the conus medullaris, we have spinal nerves. And those spinal nerves are called, they have a very cool name, it's called the cauda equina. So below the end of the spinal cord is a group of spinal nerves. And they're called the cauda equina. And if you looked at what these words mean, cauda means tail and equina means horse. So it's the horse's tail. So in our diagram of this, we can see these spinal nerves that are coming off, right? They're coming down, and they're actually kind of like chasing the openings in the sacral vertebrae. So they're coming down to open those up to come out. And one of these that's coming down is your sciatic nerve. So one thing that's really interesting about this from a health perspective is that it's much worse to damage your spine higher up than it is down low. So let's say that you had a herniated disc in C3 and C4. So if we had a herniated disc up here and it damaged the spinal cord, it's going to cause damage and nerve damage all the way down. And it's going to affect your arms and it's going to affect your legs. And so it could cause you to become paralyzed, like a paraplegic or quadriplegic. But if you have a herniated disc down here, the most common herniated disc, that's that intervertebral disc between the two vertebrae, is L5 and S1. So if I have one down here, notice that the spinal cord is not even there. And so it is going to cause damage to the nerves, but not damage to the spinal cord itself. So this could lead to sciatic pain, and this could cause problems with walking and locomotion, and it can be really problematic, right? But it's not actually as dangerous as having problems up here. C3, C4 is a region that if it is damaged, it could actually lead to your diaphragm being paralyzed. And if your diaphragm is paralyzed, your respiratory muscle, you have to be put on a ventilator for the rest of your life. So that is some interesting things about the arrangement of our spinal cord. Now, our spinal cord and our brain have what are called meninges. So we're going to talk about these meninges. So the meninges are connective tissue covering the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so these meninges, there's 3 layers. The outermost layer is what is referred to as the dura mater. And notice that I have no T, I only have 1 T in there. And that is because that actually means the mother. So the dura mater is your tough mother. This is a thick white covering. It is the outermost layer. Okay. The second layer is the arachnoid mater. And arachnoid means spider. And so this has spidery webs in it, right? And so this is the middle layer. And under the arachnoid mater is actually your cerebral spinal fluid. So we have fluid underneath that arachnoid mater. Then we have the last one, which is the pia mater. So this is the soft mother, and this is the inner layer that covers the nervous tissue. So this is my inner layer, and it covers the nervous tissue. So it's not a layer that you can actually peel off. It's like adhered to the spinal cord and adhered to the brain. We'll just put covers the structures. Okay, so let's look at a diagram of this. So here's my spinal cord. I have gray matter in the inside. It's almost kind of like a butterfly shaped. This is where my cell bodies reside, my cross section. This is my white matter. This is my outermost dura matter. And then the arachnoid matter has these like little extensions coming down the subarachnoid space. And then we have the pia mater, which is just adhered right to the surface. So I don't even know, do they have that? Yeah, so the innermost is the pia mater. So this actually relates to some things that you probably have heard about. So we have, for example, an epidural. What is this? This is an anesthetic that blocks nerve impulses. And so epi means upon. So the epidural would be applied on the top of the dura mater. So epidural is an anesthetic applied to the outer dura. So it's not going to be, doesn't actually penetrate the meninges. It just goes on top of that. And epidurals are typically used in women that are giving labor because it blocks the pain signals associated with labor from your waist down. So an epidural you probably have heard of. Okay. Now we also have what is called a spinal tap. This goes and sucks fluid out. So this is the removal of cerebrospinal fluid. And the cerebrospinal fluid is under the arachnoid. So it's in the subarachnoid space. We might want to test to see whether or not there is an infection in your cerebrospinal fluid. If you have meningitis, you have inflammation. It could be viral, it could be bacterial, it could be very, very serious if you get an infection in your spinal cord, which could then travel to your brain. So the spinal tap tests that. And we have an image from your book that shows that spinal tap process. Oh, I don't have that picture. So there is an image in your book that shows that spinal tap process. And one of the things that's interesting is it's done low on the back. Why would you have the spinal tap done low on the back? That is because of not wanting to damage or risk damaging your spinal cord. So if your spinal tap is done down low, right here, for example, there's no risk of penetrating too far and actually damaging the spinal cord. So that is the reason why spinal taps are done low in the spine rather than up higher.